Now, veterinary nurses are highly trained, regulated professionals, yet their title is not legally protected in the same way as veterinary surgeons. Now, this is something that I feel really strongly about. Now, when I was a new graduate, I learned a huge amount from veterinary nurses, not just practical skills, but how to manage patients, how to support clients, and how to deliver really exceptional care in the real world.
Welcome to The Consult Room, the podcast where we explore the evolving world of modern pet care. I'm Dr Paul Manktelow, a UK veterinary surgeon with a deep passion for pet health and welfare. In each episode, I'll be exploring key issues, challenging perspectives, and offering expert insight and practical advice. Because ultimately, my mission is to improve the lives of pets and the people who love them.
In today's episode, I want to talk about something that sounds quite technical, but actually affects every single pet guardian in the UK. And that's the government's decision to reform the Veterinary Surgeons Act. Now, this is a law that regulates veterinary surgeons, and in many ways, it shapes how veterinary care is delivered, who delivers it, and how the system works behind the scenes. Now, before I get into the detail, I want to set the scene from a personal perspective. Now, like many people from my generation, I grew up watching All Creatures Great and Small, with James Herriot turning up with his bag, stitching up a dog on the kitchen table and heading off to deliver a calf in a farmyard somewhere. Now, it was really warm, personal, and very community-based. And for a long time, that was the public image of what being a vet looked like. And in many ways, the Veterinary Surgeons Act was written for that world. But if you look at veterinary medicine today, whether that's on TV or in practices or in the many referral hospitals, it's completely different. We now see advanced imaging, complex surgery, long-term disease management, and levels of care that look far closer to modern human healthcare than to that idyllic picture many of us grew up with. Now, that gap between public perception, modern veterinary medicine, and outdated legislation is really at the heart of why this reform matters. Now, I'll be honest, legislation isn't the most exciting topic, but this one really matters, because it sits right at the intersection of trust, access to care, workforce pressures, and affordability. And importantly, this reform didn't come out of nowhere. Now, it follows the Competition and Markets Authority investigation into the veterinary sector, which concluded that the current regulatory framework is outdated and no longer reflects modern veterinary practice. So today, I want to explain why this act has been reformed, what's actually being consulted on right now, and what this might and might not mean for pet care in the UK. Now, as always, I'll approach this in a balanced way, drawing on my experience as a vet, including my work in the charity sector, but without losing sight of a wider picture. So what is the Veterinary Surgeons Act? Well, this act was introduced in 1966, and that date really matters. It was written at a time when veterinary practice looked completely different. Now, most practices were quite small, independently owned, and they were run and crucially owned by vets. Now, at that time, diagnostics were fairly basic, treatment options were limited, and the vet was usually the only person delivering care. Now, fast forward nearly 60 years, and veterinary medicine has changed beyond recognition. Now, I've been a vet for just over 20 years, not 60, but even in that time, the changes have been extraordinary. The technology we use, the treatments we offer, and the expectations placed on us by pet guardians are vastly different to when I first qualified. Yet the legislation that underpins all of this has not moved at all. So why is this reform happening now? Well, for years, professional bodies like the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, the British Veterinary Association have all been calling for reform, but the real catalyst came from the CMA investigation. Now, while much of the media coverage focused on cost and corporate ownership, one of the CMA's key conclusions was that the current regulatory framework is no longer fit for purpose. So in other words, the law hasn't kept pace with modern veterinary care. So that's why DEFRA has now launched a public consultation on reforming the Veterinary Surgeons Act. And it's important to be clear, this is the consultation stage. No decisions have been finalised yet. So at its core, the consultation is about modernisation. Now, one major issue is that the Act regulates individual veterinary surgeons, but not veterinary businesses. Now, of course, that made sense in 1966 when vets owned all the practices. But today, practices can be owned by corporates, charities, partnerships, or other structures. yet they're not regulated as entities in the same way. So the consultation asks whether regulation should better reflect this reality. Another major area of focus is the role of veterinary nurses and allied professionals. Now, veterinary nurses are highly trained, regulated professionals, yet their title is not legally protected in the same way as veterinary surgeons. Now, this is something that I feel really strongly about. Now, when I was a new graduate, I learned a huge amount from veterinary nurses, not just practical skills, but how to manage patients, how to support clients, and how to deliver really exceptional care in the real world. Now, these are highly skilled professionals who bring enormous value to practices. Nurses also often have the time and communication skills to build deep trust with clients. And I've seen incredibly effective care models where nurse-led clinics improve outcomes, improve client confidence, and allow the whole team to work more efficiently. Now, if you look at human healthcare, advanced nurse practitioners play a vital role in delivering safe, effective care. And while the consultation doesn't set out changes to clinical roles, many in the profession see reform as a necessary step towards better recognising and using the skills within the wider veterinary team. And that really matters for workforce sustainability and potentially for affordability too. Now, the consultation also looks at updating disciplinary processes, modernising regulation to reflect proportional risk and ensuring public confidence and transparency. So it's important to mention what this reform will not do, and this is where balance really matters. Now, reforming the Veterinary Surgeons Act will not magically make veterinary care cheaper. It will not reverse inflation. It will not solve workforce shortages overnight. And it will not undo the reality that modern veterinary medicine is more advanced and therefore more expensive than it was decades ago. Now, there has been a lot of public hope that regulatory reform will directly reduce costs. And while better regulation may improve efficiency and transparency, I don't think it's a silver bullet for affordability, and we need to be really honest about that. So it's important to say that there are also concerns from the profession. While many vets support this reform in principle, there are some concerns. Some worry about increased administrative burden, others are cautious about regulatory overreach. And there's an understandable anxiety about whether reform genuinely improves care or simply adds more complexity. So the reaction from the profession hasn't been uniformly enthusiastic, and that's healthy. Good reform needs scrutiny. So what could this mean for pet care? Well, if it's done well, reform could bring regulation closer to how veterinary care is actually delivered today. It could improve clarity about roles within the veterinary team. It could strengthen public confidence, and it could create a framework that supports efficient, modern services. But it won't replace the need for honest conversations about affordability, expectations, and access to care. Now, legislation for me, just one part of a much bigger system. So, in summary, the Veterinary Surgeons Act has served the profession and the public for decades, but the world has changed. Pets mean more to people than ever before. Veterinary medicine is more advanced than ever before. And the systems that regulate it need to reflect that reality. So this consultation is an opportunity, not a guarantee, to modernise veterinary regulation in a really thoughtful, proportionate way. And as it progresses, it's vital that both pet guardians and the profession stay engaged, informed, and realistic about what this reform could, but actually also could not deliver.
Thank you for listening to this episode. You'll find all the relevant links to this conversation in the show notes. If you enjoyed it, please follow us and leave a review. It really helps other people discover the podcast. For more insights on topics like this, you can connect with me on social media at Dr Paul the Vet, or check out my website, theconsultroom.co.uk.